These musicians insulted Mexico's most dangerous cartels, and they faced the consequences. In 2023, Peso Pluma received a death threat from one of Mexico's most dangerous cartels after showing support for El Chapo in his song Siempre Pendientes. One line in particular was like a bullet: "I protect Señor Guzman's Plaza," a clear reference to guarding the areas under Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's control. This sent a very clear message to El Chapo's rivals, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. My loyalty is with him. That's why when Peso Pluma announced he'd be performing in Tijuana, a city controlled by the Jalisco Cartel, they saw it as a direct provocation. It's a lot like territorial disputes in rap culture. You don't let an enemy step into your territory without trouble. In response, narcomantas appeared across the city, warning him to stay away. Narcomantas are threatening messages written on banners and hung in public places like bridges, schools, and even government buildings for everyone to see. The narcomantas read, "This is for you, Peso Pluma. Stay away from Tijuana on October 14th, or it'll be your last show for being disrespectful and running your mouth. If you perform, we'll beat the crap out of you." In Mexico, a threat like this isn't taken lightly, which is why Peso Pluma canceled the show and took a few security measures that made it clear he was afraid for his life. The first thing he did was buy a $4,000 bulletproof vest capable of withstanding high-caliber rounds, which he wore everywhere, whether at concerts or in his daily life. He also went from having 14 bodyguards to 50, including some who were former CIA agents. Among them, 12 never left his side. They were nicknamed the 12 Apostles, a reference to Jesus' disciples that added a touch of humor or irony to the situation. Eventually, things calmed down, mostly because Peso Pluma stopped scratching the tiger's balls, as a Mexican saying goes. But this same luck didn't follow Chalino Sánchez, who after singing about the wrong people was murdered in a truly chilling way. During a performance, Chalino was singing Alma Enamorada when a man from the crowd approached him and handed him a note. After reading it, Chalino's expression changed. He started moving nervously and wiping sweat from his forehead. The next day, he was found with his hands tied and 2 gunshots to the head. All the signs of an execution were there. What makes his murder even more shocking is that this performance was his first in Sinaloa after spending over a decade in Los Angeles as an immigrant. Had someone been waiting all these years for his return just to kill him? According to one theory, the answer is yes. It was an act of revenge, a long overdue payback from the family of the man he had killed years earlier. Legend has it that when Chalino was 8 years old, he found out that a man had raped his sister and left her naked in the street afterward. He was too young to do anything, but that anger stayed with him. As he grew older, that rage turned into a need for revenge. Then he met Hector El Chapo Perez, a man who claimed to know the guy responsible. Hector joked about it like it was funny, but Chalino wasn't laughing. He warned him, "The day I become a man, the first gun I buy is going straight into your chest, cabron." Years later, at a town party, Chalino kept his promise. He confronted Hector, unleashed all the anger he had bottled up, and avenged his sister. But vengeance came at a price. Hector had allies, and Chalino knew he couldn't stay in Sinaloa. With no other choice, he crossed the border to Los Angeles, leaving everything behind. And while this theory sounds logical, the truth is, Chalino had many more enemies, not just Hector's people. His work as a corrido singer often meant telling the stories of powerful narcos, a dangerous job, especially back then. Why? Because back in the 80s, narco corridos were still in diapers. Very little was known about the people involved in organized crime, and Chalino's songs brought them into the spotlight. Sure, the narcotraficantes loved having Chalino sing about their exploits. Some even paid him up to $300 to write custom corridos about them, but this inevitably brought trouble. For him, writing these custom corridos was just a way to make a living. It wasn't about loyalty or betrayal, he was simply a force of his own. Even so, by singing about so many figures, it was inevitable that Chalino would end up making music for people on opposing sides, and they started to see him as a traitor. This meant more and more men joined the list of people who wanted him dead, making it nearly impossible to find a clear answer to the mystery of his death. What little we do know begins with that fateful night in Culiacan on May 16th, 1992. After reading the note and realizing he was in danger, Chalino didn't run, didn't tell anyone. Instead, he did the bravest thing a musician could do when he knows his days are numbered. He kept singing. After the show, he got in a car with his brother, cousin, and 2 friends, never mentioning the mysterious note. Everything seemed fine until they were stopped by a group of men who said they were judicial police. This group of supposed officers asked Chalino to go with them. According to witnesses, he didn't resist, maybe because he didn't want to endanger the others. Deep down, he might have known this was his end. The next day, a group of farmers found a body in an irrigation canal outside Culiacán. When authorities arrived, they discovered it was Chalino.
Aquí es donde encuentran a Chalino Sánchez, ya sin vida.
The scene was grim. The corrido king was face down, floating in the still waters of the irrigation canal. His hands and feet were tightly bound behind his back, hogtied like an animal, with a blood-stained blindfold covering his eyes. 2 gunshot wounds marked his head, while bruises painted his body, a silent testimony to the torment he endured in his final moments.
El balazo estaba...
Se lo pegaron por la espalda.
Por la espalda.
Dale por aquí. No llora. Era con un cohete grande.
This type of execution was common, a signature of narco revenge against those who crossed them. And in this case, Chalino had angered someone dangerous. Tragically, the exact details of who was behind his death were never revealed. The people who were with him that night never pointed fingers at anyone, maybe because they were scared of what might happen. But one of them did reveal what Chalino's last words were.
Esa noche, él se despide de Chalino y le dice, compa Juan, digo, estoy en un Chalino Sánchez. Diga textualmente qué le dijo.
En un polvorín.
Ya Chalino Sánchez, ching.
It seems Chalino knew he was going to die, but the details of his death are still a mystery. His story didn't stop in that irrigation canal, though. Instead, he became a legend. In life, he sang about the stories no one dared to tell. In death, he became one of them, just like Valentin Elizalde, El Gallo de Oro. Valentin Elizalde wasn't afraid to die. Even during his final show, despite receiving death threats, he went on stage and did the most badass thing imaginable. He sang a song that was a direct challenge to the rival cartel called A Mis Enemigos, or To My Enemies, and he didn't sing it just once, but twice. The boldest part, however, wasn't just the song itself. It was performing it in Reynosa, Tamaulipas, the heart of his enemy's territory, Los Zetas, a move that many believe took the provocation to a whole new level. To make matters worse, Valentin opened and closed the concert with that song, almost as a way to make fun of the threats. What he didn't know was that among the crowd that night was Jaime Duran, known as El Hummer, a high-ranking member of Los Zetas. For him, the song wasn't just a performance, it was a direct challenge. Insulted and unwilling to let it go, Duran wasted no time. By the time Valentin left the venue with his driver, manager, and cousin, the wheels were already in motion. The black Suburban barely made it 100 meters before 2 cars blocked its path. In less than a minute, several armed men surrounded the car and unleashed a ruthless barrage of bullets. Valentin Elizalde was shot multiple times in the head and body, but according to his cousin, the only survivor, he was still breathing when one of the attackers approached and delivered the final shot that ended his life.
Yo agarro Vale, Vale está con vida, Vale, yo le digo, no te vayas, Vale, te vas a ir conmigo. Yo sé que él me escuchó.
A total of 70 shell casings were found at the bloody scene. Each bullet carried fury, and with every casing collected by the police, the brutality of the message became undeniable. The death of El Gallo de Oro shocked Mexico, sparking a wave of theories about who was behind it. The most popular theory points to Los Zetas. Since Valentin was from Sinaloa, a state closely tied to El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel, many believed his actions showed support for them, even if it wasn't his intention. On top of that, singing A Mis Enemigos twice in enemy territory only added fuel to the theory, but in the end, there's no definitive proof to confirm it. So, who killed him? Well, 14 years after Valentin's death, a new suspect emerged in the story, and it was none other than his cousin, Tano Elizalde, the only survivor of the attack. People began to suspect Tano after he revealed he was in a relationship with Valentin's widow. For many, this was seen as a betrayal of his cousin's memory. On top of that, Tano's ex-wife claimed in an interview that, on the day of Valentin's death, he seemed unusually restless before the concert in Reynosa.
Ese día Tano estaba muy nervioso, extremadamente nervioso. No quería ir. Muchas veces me dijo que no quería ir.
She also claimed that the original plan was to perform in Tijuana, but Tano changed the date to Reynosa just 2 weeks before the event, without consulting Valentin's manager.
Ellos iban a ir a trabajar a Tijuana y cancelaron porque Tano estuvo insistiendo en irse a Reynosa y Vale no quería ir. Eso me dijo la señora Camila, mamá de Valentín. Vale muchas veces le dijo, mamá, no quiero ir, pero Tano agarró la fecha y pues tengo el compromiso.
What made it worse was that for years, Tano Tano blamed Valentin's manager for picking the date and location, even though he couldn't defend himself because he was one of the victims of the shooting. Despite the heavy accusations from his ex-wife, Tano has always denied any involvement in Valentin's murder. He insists he was a victim too, claiming he was shot 7 times, which only deepens the mystery surrounding the death of El Gallo de Oro. What's even stranger about this case is that Valentin said he knew he didn't have much time left, 2 years before his death.
Tengo ya, que será unos 2 meses, que ya la veo, siento los pasos ya cerquita, que no sé por qué, pero ojalá y no sea así, ¿no? Ya siento venir a la huesuda, ¿no? Pero...
To this day, no one knows for sure who killed him, but the brutality of the attack is hard to forget. Just like the next musician, whose final moments were filled with unimaginable agony. The body of Sergio Gomez, lead singer of Capaz de la Sierra, was found on a rural road in Michoacán, showing clear signs of torture, beatings, burns all over his body, including his genitals, and evidence of strangulation. The scene was grim, but sadly more common than you might think. Just a year earlier, the cartel known as La Familia Michoacana had thrown 5 human heads onto the dance floor of a nightclub in Uruapan, Michoacán, while people were still dancing. Attached to one of the heads was a narco message that read, "La Familia doesn't kill for money. We don't kill women or innocents. Only those who deserve it will die. Let everyone know this is divine justice." This was the level of violence in Michoacán between 2006 and 2010, which is when Sergio Gomez supposedly angered the cartel. Apparently, it all started when Capaz de la Sierra performed a private concert for Los Zetas, the rival cartel of La Familia Michoacana. Later, Capaz de la Sierra announced a show in Michoacán, scheduled for December 1st, 2007. Naturally, La Familia saw this as a sign of disrespect since they had previously performed for Los Zetas. That's why before the performance, Sergio Gomez received threats. He was warned not to play in Michoacán or he'd face the consequences. It's unclear if the threats came directly from La Familia, but whoever sent them was dead serious. Despite the risks, Capaz de la Sierra performed anyway. No one knows who made the final decision to go, but Sergio Gomez, as the leader of the band, took the worst of it. After the show, the group split into 3 vehicles to head to Puerto Vallarta for their next concert. On the way, a convoy intercepted the car Sergio Gomez was traveling in. A group of armed men abducted him along with 2 of his companions. Hours after the kidnapping, the 2 companions were released, but Sergio was nowhere to be found. Hours turned into days with no sign of Sergio until December 3rd, 2 days after the abduction. His lifeless body was found discarded on a dirt road, treated as if it were nothing more than trash. Authorities never officially blamed La Familia Michoacana for lack of evidence, leaving the case unsolved to this day. Some believe it could have been a crime of passion, pointing to the fact that Sergio Gomez's genitals were burned. However, to this day, it's all just speculation.